Hi, everybody. How are you doing this morning or afternoon, wherever you are? So thank you for joining us today for the RSNA webinar on 3D printing education, building a curriculum for trainees. Oh, as I go blazing past us. My name is Dr. Summer Decker, and I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Jonathan Ford.
Hi,
And
everybody.
hi. And we are here at the University of Southern California. We are lead the Center for Innovation and Medical Visualization here at the Keck School of Medicine at USC. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about today, education and what our experiences have been. So looking forward to hopefully having a good conversation with you guys when we're all done. But before we get started, we want to talk to you about RSNA, making sure that you are familiar with all the offerings that we have with RSNA. If you've come here, then hopefully you're a member, or if you're interested in becoming a member, you can always join. There's a lot of activities every week, so just like this. So definitely check RSNA out, the Radiology Society North America. It is where 3D printing really is housed for medicine, which is really exciting. The special interest group is a part of RSNA. It's a 3D group dedicated to really looking at 3D printing and immersive technologies as we apply it to medicine, education like today, and even research. So we look at the role of radiology and how it works with our interdisciplinary collaborations in our clinical practice. So if you haven't learned about this group, you definitely want to become a member of this. It is a subgroup to RSNA, and there are special rates for our allied health professionals. And this is really where that discussion happens on how people are doing things and what we can do together. So definitely, this is kind of one of the offerings today of what we do. There are subcommittees in RSNA 3D SIG. I lead one of them with Rob Puglisi. That's the education. We also have an appropriateness committee with David Ballard and Frank Rubicki, quality assurance with Nicole Wake and Laura Gilmore, and outreach with Devarsh Vyas and Todd Patilla. So if you're interested in that, there's a QR code here so that you can find out more information about the SIG and these outreach groups that we have. I would be remiss if I did not mention that we have our huge annual meeting coming up. It is in Chicago every year. This year it is in December 1st to the 5th. This is where everything happens. It's the Super Bowl of radiology. So you definitely want to be there if you can. I'm being held at the McCormick Center. Registration has already opened, so you can always go ahead and go register. At that conference, you will see on Thursday, December 5th from 12 to 4 p.m. Central at the McCormick Place, a 3D SIG symposium. And this is where the subgroup that I've mentioned, we will all be there and we'll be talking about hot topics in the field, things that people get excited about, like education, but also reimbursement, how to do things. So it really is everyone sitting in the room and having great conversations. So you definitely don't want to miss it. And the QR code here, you can sign up for that SIG symposium. One of the things we're going to do this year is a new session. It is called the SIG Forum. And this is really trying to give us a platform for discussion to help in different topics in the 3D world. So 3D printing, AR, VR. And we really want folks to join us and come talk about how you're using this, the various aspects of how you're using it for collaboration. And so this is an opportunity for our SIG members to be able to have a role in actually these educational activities. So we want you to submit information if you're interested in presenting something you've got going that maybe all of us want to hear about. And so this is how you submit. You have until September 13th for the SIG forum. So definitely submit something. We don't know what you're doing out there, so we would love to find out more, and definitely looking forward to hearing all those presentations. We also want to let you know that at the RSNA conference in Chicago, there is a showcase. And every year it gets really exciting to see what people have done over the year, and you can bring your 3D print there and show it off. And so there is also a top model competition. So we will actually be recognizing that. This is only open to SIG members, so you definitely want to join the SIG, which you can do between now and then. But you definitely want to send in your application so that you can present your work there. The deadline for this is October 18th, and if you want to sign up, the QR code is there. And you can get all of this information after this webinar, where it will be actually posted online and YouTube. We also have another exciting opportunity going right now, which is the 3D Special Interest Group Research Grant. And this is for investigator-initiated research and immersive imaging, such as 3D printing, AR, VR, and it is open to active members of the SIG. This has been such a bright spot for the SIG, because we're starting to see some of that really unique research being submitted by trainees and members, and it's been great to see what people are able to do. So we really want to be able to help support and fund this research. This is what your membership dues go to. So please submit something. I want you to see that the application deadline for this is September 30th. So not too far away, but plenty of time to pull something together. And you can find more information about this online. So thank you again for joining us today. We're looking forward to having, again, hopefully a good presentation and a good discussion. So I will say, before we start our presentation, you can submit your questions as we present. We can't see them as we're presenting, but you can submit them to the Q&A area. And then when we're done with the presentation, we will be answering those questions for you. And so please shoot us some questions. Otherwise, it's just going to get awkward, Jonathan and I talking to each other. So definitely
That's
we
pretty
want to
normal, actually.
yeah, we do that every day. You don't have to let us do that here live. So definitely, if you're interested in the SIG, come join us. We're a great group, a lot of awesome stuff going on. And again, it's like a big family. And so we'll talk more about that as we go through. All right, well, hopefully everyone is ready to talk a little bit about education. So this is a really important topic for myself and Jonathan, because this is one of our most passionate areas. We love education and 3D printing, and I really think that this is the future of our field. So I really am grateful to the RSNA SIG for inviting us to come and present today. So we're going to talk a little bit about medical student, resident, fellow, and other areas of education that we've been able to do in our career. As I mentioned, we are at the Keck School of Medicine at University of Southern California, and beautiful sunny California right now. So perfect weather for this lovely talk. And of course, we're in the basement because it's radiology. So we head up the Center for Innovation and Medical Visualization, and we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like here and some of our past experiences. Just a disclaimer, we have no financial disclosures, but we do advise for Stratasys and for Forum Labs, unpaid. But if anybody wants to give us money, we're always happy to take that. So who we were, some of the folks on this call will probably still, because we're getting this a lot. We just started at USC recently, but we were for many, many years, for actually 12 years or 13 years, I guess, faculty at the University of South Florida, Morsani College of Medicine, and the Department of Radiology, and Tampa General Hospital. I founded the team, our 3D team, in 2011, and I served as the director, and Jonathan served as the technical director there of that team. And part of our duties as faculty in that department was to work with medical students, with residents, and with graduate students. So all of the work that I'm going to talk about today, a good portion of it will be what we were able to do there and what we have started doing here. So that I want to make sure that we let everyone know, yes, this is the same group that was in South Florida. Apparently we are allergic to the cold. So
Oh, very much so. Very
stay in
much so.
locations. So our previous sites, this is some of the hospitals that we have worked with over the years. So this experience that you will hear today has been based in a number of these hospitals. So you may have heard a little bit about our work at these places. So like I said, we have gone from one coast to the next. We are now at USC and have started a new center for innovation and medical visualization. I am again still the director, and Jonathan is the associate director, and we're still building out our team here, but we've been able to hit the ground running here at USC and have a lot of great work going on and building those new relationships that all of us that work in 3D medicine, that that we need to have those relationships with other specialties and within radiology. So it's an exciting time for our team, and hopefully building even better than before. This is who we are now. We are Keck School of Medicine, but we also work out of Keck Medicine, CHLA, Norris Cancer Center, and LA General. So the way that we see 3D medicine as our team has always been this diagram. You can't use 3D modeling, 3D printing, and the clinical aspects and not immediately see the applications to education and research. I think that those then drive back our clinical. It's just a circle that you can't ignore. And so I know a lot of us, when we were getting started, we wanted to tackle the clinical aspects of it because there's such an amazing application for what we can do there. But I think in order to build a field, you have to keep doing the research, and you have to do the education and training and that to build that next generation of who's going to be doing this. And so that's what hopefully we have been able to, and I hope our legacy will be when we're all done with this, was really building that next gen look at this field. Because let me go back here. So we have, as most of us know in this field, you capture that 3D imaging out of our different modeling areas. So whether it's from CT or MR or even laser scans, we have a lot of data coming at us. So once we capture that 3D data, we have different outpoints, right? So all of us that are in this field, you can do a visualization, you can do a 3D print, or you can do some type of analysis. And it's from there that you have to kind of learn, when is that appropriate? When is that not? What should we do? Is this possible? And so a lot of that is job time that you learn it, but sometimes you need to train folks in that. And we're just like you guys that are out there. We do 3D medical printing. We do our clinical work every day. We had a case come in this morning that we were working on before starting this. So we do our anatomical modeling, our surgical cutting guides, and all of those things. So that is our big focus. But being able to then say, what can we do beyond just using that in that one clinical setting, in that one clinical scenario? We want to be able to use that and be a good steward of the resource. And so that's kind of why we've really looked and focused a lot of our efforts on teaching. So to talk to you a little bit about like why we care about teaching so much and how we have taught it. When I was at USF, I was one of the associate program directors for the residency, the diagnostic radiology residency, and I worked with the IR residency. And I interviewed all of the candidates for our residency for the last 12 years there. So over 1,000 people wanting to do radiology. And I remember sitting with them and I would say, what we do today is not what you're going to do 20 years from now. And a few years ago, one of my residents looked at me and he said, Dr. Decker, you always say that, but it's actually in 5 years, things have changed already. For example, 5 years ago, 3D printing didn't have CPT codes. And he's like, so even in my time here in my residency, I've seen the field change. And it really struck me that we're in definitely this big transition in the field of radiology, and it is moving so fast. That's one of the fastest moving fields in medicine. And so as that has happened, there are people that have tried to say that we are in a vanishing field, right? That we're all going to be replaced by AI, that emerging technologies are killing the field. And I don't see it that way. I feel like we actually need to train the next generation of radiologists, the next generation of engineers for that future. We need to future-proof them. And part of that comes from not being scared of what the future looks like for our field, but embracing it and then learning the technology and running with that. Because how else do we prepare the next generation for the future of radiology and whatever that looks like, or the future of medicine and whatever that looks like, but not just waiting for it, but actually helping lead it and drive it. And so we want to make sure that we can future-proof our trainees for a field and make sure that our field still is standing there and doing the amazing work that it does. And so I think that 3D modeling, 3D printing, and stuff that we're talking about today actually just adds value to the field of radiology. And obviously RSNA thinks so, as we're part of their SIG. So I think it's definitely something that we have to think about. This is why we're doing this. And so what does that mean? When I was at USF, I was approached by the Dean of Undergraduate Medical Education for the medical students, and they really wanted to figure out how to incorporate this technology and incorporate radiology better into the medical school curriculum. And so I remember getting the request to build a radiology curriculum, and myself and Jonathan here and Dr. Todd Hazelton, who's our chair at the time, we sat down together and thought, how do we look at radiology differently? And how do we train for that? And so why not start earlier than fourth year of medical school teaching people about radiology? Why not start day one? And so I had the real honor every year for the last few years of teaching the first lecture of medical school. And my first thing I would do was ask them, like, who here has been told radiology is a dying field? And pretty much everybody would agree. And I said, that's just medicine, that's just surgery. They want you to go in their fields and ignore radiology. And there'd be people in the background like, I want to do radiology, but I don't want, I'm too embarrassed to say so. And I would tell them, okay, I'm going to teach radiology to you today. There's a reason why we're the #1 lecture in your first day here. You've got your white coats. There's a reason why this is where we're sitting. We're that important to what you're going to do. You will not do a surgery without knowing what's going on inside. You won't make some of those clinical decisions without knowing what's going on inside. And we are the ones that have that roadmap. And so I would tell them, at the end of this, if you feel like we're a dying field, then you let me know. But one of the things I would make sure to do is when I sat there and talked to them about what is an X-ray and what is a CT scan and what is an MRI scan and every modality, the last thing I always would talk about was the other modality, which was 3D. I did not want them to know a world without it. I wanted it just to be as an assumption, just like X-ray was, because this is a tool that they would be having. And we would teach them starting day one appropriateness criteria. So how to know when to order what, because ultimately most of that room is not going to go into radiology. We know that from the numbers. But what I wanted to do was really make sure that we had well-educated referring clinicians to us, but also ones that knew that the field of 3D was there. And so we wanted them, those future surgeons and everyone in there, to know, hey, this is a tool that radiology has that you can use. And what we saw over the years that this started, I think we were coming up on 10 years of doing it this way. What we saw was suddenly, as they made their way through medical school and into their residencies, we were getting those trainees that we taught that day one were suddenly requesting that technology. And so that is actually how we were able to build some of our clinical output, was because we were training them day one and they knew how to order for it and they knew what they wanted and how to use it. It was amazing to watch residents who had trained at USF tell their attendings, hey, there's this technology that could really help us with this complex case, and then bring that attending to us. So it really worked out very nicely in that regard. And so there was a lot of interest in this. Suddenly we started seeing an interest in people going into radiology. I would walk out of that first day lecture, and we had, I think, 170 students on average, sometimes a little bit higher. And we would have at least 50 requests to come hang out in the lab and do research and do whatever they could to be in the 3D lab. A number of the students would come out and say, I'm going to be a radiologist and I want to train here with you guys on day one. And I'm going to introduce you to some of them as we go through this presentation, but they actually ended up working with us, which was awesome. So this is actually one of them, Dr. Chelsea Sparks, who is down the road now at UC San Diego, doing her MSK fellowship with 3D. So we started incorporating our training into not just in our radiology lectures, but also incorporating imaging into gross anatomy, making sure that in the gross lab that they had access to medical images that corresponded with the actual anatomy that they were learning. That way they could see it on the different imaging modalities, and that was very helpful to them. imaging was everywhere. And so they definitely wanted to see that. Another thing that we started was a 3D scholarly concentration. USF had a great program called RISE that allowed medical students to do projects and research or business. And one of the things we wanted to do is give them an opportunity to come work with us. And so from there, we were able to start a training program where students would come during the summer on a scholarship and spend their summers with us. And so we were able to do this for all 4 years of their training. And so some folks came back over and over again, which was fantastic. And the other folks like this here is Dr. Daniel Martin, who is a resident at USF right now. We were able to recruit a lot of these folks to stay into our training program, which was great. But what I also saw was them evolving in their thought process. The more they understood about radiology, the more that they were suddenly able to come up with really interesting clinical questions, and the work that they were seeing that would make them ask certain things. So the clinical research, so low hanging type research, right? So this is 3D printing, imaging, morphometric type analysis, but really cool stuff. And we were able to win a number of years. We actually won the medical school's research awards. Our students were so and residents. It was really exciting. We also started a dedicated elective 3D rotation for medical students. This was generally for more senior medical students after they've had at least 2 years of myself, Jonathan, and a number of our faculty, like Dr. Katie Bailey and folks, teaching them all about the technologies in the classroom. We wanted to give them an opportunity to come have an elective rotation, and so we provided that a lot here. And there were two of our medical students, Dr. Zach Beecham and Dr. Annie Ronas, here that were rotated with us. And this fourth year anatomy elective imaging we also started was right as they were about to take their step 2 exam. Students said, I really want another review of all the imaging. Could we have that? So Jonathan and I started an online elective to be able to train them in imaging anatomy yet again. So a lot of the normals and normal anatomy, some pathology, some diagnostic, but really just prepping them for that exam. Which was really exciting. And we had a lot of students, not just the radiology interested students, but the surgeons, the emergency medicine folks, and we had a lot of students from other medical schools sign up for this rotation. And so it was exciting for us to be able to offer that as well. We also worked directly with the radiology interest group, and we would provide them opportunities to come hang out in the lab. This was actually one evening during kind of COVID time, as you can see with all of our masks, but we would bring them in so that they could be exposed. If they hadn't gotten it already, they wanted more time, and that they could come in and learn.
Exposed to 3D, not
Yes,
COVID.
not to COVID. But yeah, exposed to the technology and kind of sit and have that one-on-one time in the lab, hanging out and learning everything that we could from them. So that we had a huge radiology interest group, which was really exciting. So what were the results of all this medical student education? According to the deans, they tracked that from the time we introduced radiology as a curriculum in the longitudinal radiology curriculum across all 4 years of medical school, they saw an increase in the STEP scores. And that was very exciting to see. And in their words, they attributed that in part to the work that we had done. What we also saw, as I mentioned, was an increased awareness of 3D technologies across other specialties. That was building that future customer base. And so we were starting to hear surgeons walk in and say, my med student's telling me there's something here I should see, or my resident now. So that was a great benefit of that we were not anticipating. And the thing that was actually the most shocking to us was that we actually grew the number of radiology resident applications. When we first started this, we would get about 2 applications from the medical school class, 2 to 3 a year. In the last few years, we've averaged between 20 and 30 medical students going into the field of radiology, not all obviously at USF, but around the hospitals around the country, like Mayo and Johns Hopkins, MGH, some really great top programs that were interested in how they were being trained in radiology and in 3D. So we saw the direct benefit of that. And so we know that that number is not normal for radiology, but it was a happy discovery that we had. So because we were training the medical students, of course, we spend every day with our residents. And our residents also were very interested in the technology. And because I was interviewing the residents every single day for the future residents, so every time we were interviewing, people would say, well, if I come there, can I learn that technology? Can we learn more about it? And so the more that we got that request from our residents and even from other residencies around the country reached out to us, can my students come to you? Can my residents come to you? We started thinking how to build a resident curriculum. And so we first, just like all residencies, we have a daily resident conference. And so we were, myself and Jonathan were incorporated into those resident conferences, and we would come in and do after RSNA. What was the cool technologies that were there? What is 3D anyway? What is AI? What is AR, VR? All different types of topics for them. And so there was a dedicated curriculum for them and applications throughout. We also taught a 1 week training course in research and how to do clinical research within a radiology department. So a lot of activity with the daily conferences. We also started one of the first, if not the first, 3D dedicated clinical rotations for a residency. Because of our work with the ACGME, I was very lucky to have two amazing program directors that I worked with, Dr. Todd Cum and then Dr. Douglas Advancets. And we sat down because we would go to these conferences, we would hear the medical students doing amazing things, we'd hear the residents wanting to hear that, and we would go to meetings like AUR and people say, how can my residents learn that? And so we started a resident rotation, not a research rotation, but an actual clinical rotation. And our goals were, yes, to teach them the technology and how to do it, but there were kind of some bigger picture goals. And before I let Jonathan talk about what that rotation looks like, our goals were to, yes, get them to understand the process and appropriateness. One of our biggest hurdles, and I've said this on many 3D SIG webinars, was actually radiologists understanding why we even existed as a field, because it's not what they do. And I needed them to understand this is why this is there. This is the medical imaging come in your hand and how the other teams, other specialties work with it. So we wanted them to become advocates for the technology when they're sitting behind their workstation, when they're sitting in the trauma center, reading, oh, wow, this case would be really good for that. So teach them appropriateness, teach them when it mattered, but also become better consultants in a world that radiologists are worrying about whether or not they're being told they're becoming obsolete. Hiding behind our workstations and just becoming a report is not the way to combat that. So we're not just an order and a report going back out. We wanted them to become better consultants for those really complex cases. And so we wanted the residents and the radiologists to be brought in those discussions. And so in order to do that, you have to train residents in how to be that consultant, that clinical partner. And again, this was our efforts of future proofing, because I wanted the residents, not right now, the technology was 3D and AI, but we don't know what the next technologies are. And I don't want them to be scared like a lot of people in the field are about whatever the next big thing is. I want them to be like, oh yeah, I remember when 3D came out and I got trained in that and I survived and it's all good. So future proofing them for a field of radiology, for perpetuity. So more comfort for them for emerging technologies. So I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan so that you can talk to us about resident training.
Thank you, Summer. So those are the main overarching goals of our 3D rotation, but we were able to, gosh, I forget how many, but like pull in a lot of different residents into this. Usually there's more senior residents, but some of them would be able to come in if they already had some exposure, like if we had them as a med student, we were able to train them on 3D early, or if they were a part of our summer RISE program, they came through the lab, they had that exposure, we'd get them a little earlier than a PGY1 or PGY2, but it depended on they were special in that respect. But we were able to expose them to a lot of different things, and also while still teaching and maintaining a professional clinical rotation, we had a lot of fun doing it as well, and we were able to frankly make a lot of friends along the way. So we appreciate that. Next slide, please. So looking at it a little closer and some of the moving parts of it. So it was a dedicated resident rotation, like we said, and the whole thing was to teach the process. And this was from beginning to end. So we teach the initial consult. We teach, is this request appropriate? Is the imaging that has been already done appropriate? Or can we get involved before it is even imaged and say, okay, we would recommend you image with these settings, therefore we can have the most optimal scan images so we can have a good 3D model. Basically be able to not have garbage in, garbage out, be able to capture that and have the start of the conversation there. Also from there, we would go into the modeling process. And also then from once we had it modeled, the consult of like, is this how we want it to go, and the interaction with the requesting physician. And then from there, usually it was a print, sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes there were a lot of other outputs. Did it need to be a print? Sometimes just a 3D visualization was all that was needed. Sometimes they needed some kind of analysis and not a print itself. So it just depends. We were a 3D printing lab, but we also encompassed all aspects of 3D in that respect. And so if in the event it was a print, and they have to get the hands dirty and do the post-processing. Here you see two of our past residents, Dr. Paul Farnsworth and Dr. Vinny Procaccio. Both have gone on to doing fantastic attendings. Paul is up in Mayo. He was supposed to have a fellowship in Mayo, and then Dr. Jay Morris liked him so much they kept him. So he's now in the frozen north, and he's supposed to come back to Florida. He did not. And then Vinny stayed in Florida because he is also like Summer and I, a warm weather fan. So, but everyone seemed to enjoy the post process, and it gives that tactile, almost immediate, I'm accomplishing something. And after that, we have the handoff of the print to the requesting physician. Then we were also involved in the application of it. So if it was used in conference, it was used for the surgical planning. And then once it was used, they were also part of the debrief and feedback process. So like, okay, how was it done? Did you like it? What did you not like? What can be improved? What is there something we can tweak moving forward? So that all encompassed the entire process of the program. So please, next slide. So again, we trained in the software. We had the teach in the software. We have Dr. Jill Sherman there questioning her life choices. And then over here on the right, we have Dr. Roy Watkin and Zach Beecham. They helped us with some of our odd veterinary cases that would happen every so often. But the software was the biggest learning curve. Frankly, we were very lucky that these were all people who had a year or two or more in the residency race. They had a very good base of the imaging and the being able to understand and read the imaging. So that we have that educated eyes. Now we're giving them educated hands so they can actually run the software. The software can be a little bit tricky. Some pick it up faster than others. But what came in really handy is there were some residents who would do this rotation every year. So by the time they came in through the second time around, they were old hat. They can just say, "Hey, do this, go," and it was amazing. They really talented people we worked with. Next slide, please. But like I said, we didn't always do the 3D print. It wasn't always the end point. Sometimes it was just a quantitative analysis. This was a cranial vault expansion before and after post-op surgery. Interesting enough, we had the resident who did this. She had just come through a neurorad rotation, and she said, and the physician who requested this was like, came in very nice and respectful and happy to talk with her. And then after he left, she turned to me, "That man's never been nice to me. Why was he nice?" And then Dr. Summer said, "Oh, that's because he needed something." And it was an interesting view behind the curtain in that respect. Next slide, please. We also, again, wasn't always 3D printing. We looked at immersive technology, so AR, VR. Usually the resident would have an interest in it, but we were able to look at and see what were the potential clinical applications of incorporating the either augmented or virtual reality. And a lot of this was resident driven. Dr. Sampson was fantastic, and it was very techno joy, I think is the term, not technophobe, techno joy. But we were able to look at the different immersive realities that were coming through that were going to be applied in a clinical lab setting. Next slide, please. So moving back to 3D printing, 3D printing wasn't just, okay, we print and go. They were involved in what kind of 3D printing was used, what kind of material were we going to use. So sometimes it was like, if it's just a pre-bending of plates, you can go with an SLA print, because it's going to be one material at a time. Or if it's going to go into like a surgical simulator, surgical planning, do we need to use one of the PolyJet machines, multicolored, multi-material? And it just depended on what would happen, and depending on which one was, what the application was, they helped decide, okay, this is going to go into surgery, it's going to be scrubbed in, okay, we're going to go this route. Is it going to be used for patient education and used as a visual aid? It would be over here. So it just depends. And then that would also send us which direction we're going to go for the post-processing, as of course each printer has their own needs. And they were able to know that going in, and they knew that as they left. Next slide, please. So that included, though, how to operate the printer. So once they were able to get the model situation nailed down, they were able to then say, okay, we're going to send it to the printer, figure out how the printer works, and also if there's anything that needs to be done or replaced or fixed, because some printers are more finicky, I would say, than others, and so there are room for things to go wrong. And so they were part of the troubleshooting process. So there were times when we had to remove entire side panels of machines, figure out, why was this leaking? Why is this fuse blown? And they were able to help us with that and do that and participate in that. So the daily maintenance of the machines, they were able to help in. Now, we were teaching them this because we know they are going in to be attending radiologists. However, the more they know about this program, they can consult intelligently. They can know what is possible. And so when they have like, okay, we're going to send something to print, a magic happens doesn't always work the first time around. So they know how important deadlines are. So this is all skill sets that they're going to be able to have. So when they are in a place that can have this as an option, they know exactly what is capable, what is not, and also they can know when to push the technology and when to say, okay, that's not possible yet. So it's a fantastic tool. And again, we're building colleagues and it's wonderful. Next slide, please. Back one. So this is the one they actually seem to enjoy it. So once they have the print, they are able to do the post-processing. They seem to enjoy the water jet, to be honest. That's the one that seems like instantaneous, like, okay, it's working, which is awesome. And then they're able to scrape it around. But they all hated the SLA snip, snip, snip clips. They weren't a fan of that. They joke, and they are always more patient than I was. I inevitably would get impatient, try and remove it manually, and hurting my hand at some point. But they were doctors, so they were able to help me, so that was nice. Next slide, please. They also learned in this instance what not to do. Dr. Calvert was working on one of our prints. He was had his headphones in and was spraying off one of the prints, and he neglected to monitor what the drain was doing. And once he noticed it had overflown, we came running in, and as you can see in the center picture, I had my shoes on still. We were able to have a bunch of towels we threw around to try and soak up the water, and we quickly picked up the computer you see that's behind me there. And then as we continued to clean up, my shoes came off, but Dr. Calvert ran with it and rolled with it. And then the next couple of days, we showed up with a poster that he created for us and said, "Mind the sink," to document the instance. And that poster still is with us now. So we learned what not to do. So one of the things that is super critical and important is every time we had this rotation, we'd have them come in, and any case that came in at the door, they would do. However, what would happen that we noticed that we'd have like almost themes. It wasn't planned, it just would happen that like we'd have nothing but like Boston Miller would come in, it'd be nothing but livers for some reason, or we'd have Todd Nebraska come in and be nothing but noses for some reason. We don't know why that would happen, it just would. But we also maintained a library of cases, so even depending on what was coming in, they still would have this clinical aspect, so they knew exactly the different similar cases we would do. So typical cardiac cases, typical craniofacial traumas. And so we look at TAVR planning, ASD, and VSD, congenital repairs. We looked at liver cancer cases. We looked at ENT cases and looking at complicated airway repair cases. We also look at typical ortho cases where they'd be able to look at not only like limb reconstruction or congenital limb reconstruction, but also like simplistic as like doing like a orbital fracture repair, mirroring one side to the other to help you with pre-bend the plates. So they'd have the exposure to all of it regardless of what was coming in the door. Next slide, please. And that included one poor soul, their very first day, they came into the plane of a separation of conjoined twins. And it was like, here you go, get going. And they were able to do a fantastic job with it. But this was they got thrown in the deep end immediately on their first day of this rotation. But they did fantastically done. Next slide, please. Next slide. There's also a perk of the rotation. Every resident would take home something as a keepsake of this rotation. Usually they'd go with something like Dr. Ben Kessler there and take one of the patient cases that they enjoy, especially using the area of interest. Others would go with something a bit more interesting, like a Groot, or Caroline got a Lord of the Rings, The One Ring, and also an impromptu Golem impression from me. But she enjoyed that. One more perk of the rotation, we do a lot of veterinary and zoological work. This would happen usually, there's always at least usually one every rotation. And so they were able to expose and be involved in that. So sometimes it was just the medical diagnostic aspect of the animal. Other times it involved in the full-blown 3D cutting guide, planning, 3D prosthesis design. So that went really well. And that was always something that people tend to enjoy. Next slide, please. So that included field trips out to visit some of our rhino patients, or opportunities for Dr. Katie Bailey there to visit and meet a penguin. So I'm going to turn it over to Summer. That was the close-in view of what the resident rotation looked like. Now we'll move on to other aspects of education.
So, like Jonathan said, this was a very popular rotation, and we're really grateful to the program directors, Dr. Advances, who worked with us and allowed us to do this with the residents. But as he said, we were getting more and more residents signing up, and also people coming back. And one of the things that we saw is that not just the clinical work, but a lot of times when we were doing these consults with other specialties, we were seeing research happen spontaneously, some of the quantitative analyses. And we wanted to make sure that our residents got credit for the work that they were doing with the other departments. And so we had a policy working with other departments that if any of these cases spurned on research, that our residents and our fellows definitely got to be a part of that and make sure that they got credit for that. So it was really great because we would go in also to interdisciplinary conference. As you see here at the top corner, this is with some of our surgical residents working alongside the radiology residents. And it was really nice to see, like, seeing all these disciplines sitting in the same room together and training at an early age. So things that we were able to work on both in DR and IR were like clinical applications, case reports, things like that, but also education and training opportunities. And you see our colleagues there. So we were able to do, as I mentioned, a number of interdisciplinary grand rounds. And that's because, as we know, our surgeons and our medicine teams are often the end user or cardiology. And so we wanted to make sure that they knew what was available to them. And so we would go in and train other departments. And a lot of times this was an opportunity for our residents to go into these specialties and train them and what we could do possible. We've been able to set that up here at USC and have been making the rounds, doing all the grand rounds, teaching the technology, managing expectations on how fast things can be printed and done. Like, can I have that by noon and it's 10? Things like that. We're doing that now here. That's the step. So there was a lot of interdepartmental education going on, some obvious ones, here with the kind of high users of our field, but also some not so obvious. We were able to help with veterinary applications, the zoological vets, and do training for them, BME, biology, anthropology. So there was a lot of different types of areas that we were able to help in the education. So it wasn't just how do you train in radiology for our med students and our residents, but across the spectrum of our field. And then again, as we talked about the importance of learning to be consultants, we really wanted to make sure, and we still hold to this here, that consulting with other specialties, that you learn how to do that, learn what their needs are, learn to anticipate their needs, but also how to be good consultants. And we've all probably done research or work where, one person says we'll do something and they don't follow through. So really learning to stay on task and making sure that we train people to reply and things like that, and how to be a good consultant. So these were areas not just for our residents, but also how we could train other specialties, how to consult with us, what is it we need. And again, this is stuff we've been working on here and establishing, and just having a great time doing that, and loving getting to meet with some of these new teams. So one of the things that those conversations would often have was, man, if we only had this simulator that could help us with that. And so what we have had the output was a lot of resident training, and like simulated hip aspirations, um, lumbar punctures, scalp simulators. This is actually last night. One of our prints was being simulated for a upcoming case with the orthopedics team. And the really cool thing was that we were able to keep those tricky cases that our residents never wanted to see again, but we knew their colleagues, the other residents, maybe wouldn't have seen one like that, and then let them look at that and let them work on that. And residents were always involved in the design of these simulators. So this is one of them here, a craniotomy simulator with our colleagues at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital and Dr. Alex Rockers. We were able to create a simulator training module for them and 3D print out. And so this represents years of work of us working with their residents on how to make that best for them. Our residents loved the lumbar puncture training. Obviously, in radiology, we train people to do lumbar punctures on the patient. So we wanted to be able to not have it like that, be able to actually do a lumbar puncture training simulator. And this was a resident project that was actually received grant funding through the university. So really taking those complex cases and making low stakes environment where we could practice that. And actually we would use cameras and different tools to be able to make sure that we were doing it right. And you can see here. One of the other areas beyond our trainees and UME and GME was teaching the teachers. So we would often do training courses. And this was our opportunity to train the other surgeons, the other clinicians on the 3D technologies and training courses, but not just for our hospital, but for folks around the country and around the world. And they would come, and this is one of our courses here with Moffitt Cancer Center and our colleagues there. And one of my favorite things that we were able to do for education is that we would go out into the community. This is an opportunity we had every year that we would go out into the schools, and this is a elementary school of children, like at-risk children. And so this was a really cool opportunity to go in and teach them about what is possible and using these technologies and the amazing questions that they would ask. So we loved being able to teach even at the elementary school level. And we've taught like K through 12 on this because we want to create that next generation of medical students. And taking the show on the road, we often will go to other hospitals and other places. This is us a few weeks back at UC Irvine, with our colleagues there, teaching them about what we've been doing and what we are doing here. And then here, some other SIG members, Dr. Justin Ryan and Jonathan, myself at Comic-Con a few weeks back, talking about this technology down in San Diego. I would like to really, as important as everything that we've talked about, one of our biggest, most important things here as we wrap up is we would be remiss if we didn't mention the most impactful area of education, which is patient education. You know, you've got this example here where you have a patient with advanced pancreatic cancer, and they're getting that worst diagnosis of their life. And so, what we were able to do with our colleague, Dr. Raj Kadar, head of body imaging at Tampa General Hospital, was really being able to 3D print out that pancreas and that pancreatic cancer for them. Not only did it help the surgeons, which is what we hope in our field, help them determine if it was operable or inoperable. But what we saw was being able to put that in the patient's hands and help them understand their case. And while this was not an area that initially that was in the forefront of my mind, I'll admit, when we started seeing that impact of putting them in the patient's hands, we started realizing the importance of education for the patient. Here's an example of Moffitt Cancer Center with Dr. Dan Anaya and one of his patients. And this patient said to us, "This is the first time I truly understand what I'm up against." And I really don't think that you can really sell this field any better than hearing just that. So we did a lot of patient education training for our other specialties here with Dr. Sarah Obachan and her colleagues, looking at twin-to-twin transfusion education piece, and they would take these to patients so that they could understand, but also to their conferences, even high-risk procedures, or really helping with patient education of why this is happening. And here's an example here with a complex developmental case, and that was used for helping counsel the mother here, because how do you understand looking at black and white images if that's not what you're used to? Our favorite patient education case also was this case, which was a clinical case of a chaos syndrome, a congenital high airway obstruction syndrome case. This was an 8-month in utero fetus, and we had an airway that had not developed. And so they wanted to use this clinically, but also to train all of the people in the room on how to approach this case to get the timing exactly right, because it would help them be able to know exactly where to make their cuts, but also to help the family understand that. And why this case means so much to us, our last week in Tampa, we got a call, and the mother actually brought the little guy to come see us all these years later. That's him sitting on my lap. And so knowing that we had a case that was so high risk and that he's doing well because all of us were able to train around a 3D print, and the family actually has a copy of that 3D print. So very, very special thing for us. So as I finish up here, some education resources for you. I mentioned at the beginning, I'm going to always be selling this because it's where I go for help, is the 3D special interest group. There are committees for education, so residents, fellows, certification engineers like Jonathan, that these guys are also getting certifications, international standards. So definitely join us today. In conclusion, hopefully you have seen that there is a wide variety of 3D printing applications in education at all levels, even down to my little kindergartners and elementary school folks, to our medical students, to residents, and even beyond. So, but our focus here was we really wanted to show that we could incorporate 3D and radiology across all 4 years of medical school. I want to train a generation of doctors where they don't know a world without 3D technologies. It's here. We're not going anywhere as a field. And so I want them to just accept this as normal. And in order to do that, you got to get in the room and you have to be training them to think that way. Resident wise, we wanted them to understand the process, to be able to manage expectations, because they can say that's going to take this length of time. But also when they're looking at us going, why is that taking so long? And we can say, you remember when that printer broke down that time you were in here? This is what's going on. Being the point of contact to help identify important cases, maybe, and being more than just a radiology report coming back, being more visible in the process. And I believe truly that that is how you future-proof your field. So in summary, thank you guys so much for letting us present. Thank you to all my colleagues back at USF Health, especially Dr. Doug Advances and Dr. Kadar, who always worked with us. Every one of our trainees, medical students, residents, fellows that we've worked with all of these years, this is their work. We are just representing what they did. And to all of my new colleagues here at USC who have been really embracing this and letting us and coming up with new ways we can use this for teaching. So we're really an excited point right now. This is our contact information. If you need to reach out to us for any reason, definitely do so. And again, I'd like to finish with saying, please join us as an RSNA SIG. This is here is the QR code that you can use and to join us. So with that, I'm going to end this presentation, but answer any questions that have come in. So hopefully you guys have something for us. Oh goodness, I do see that there's a bunch. All right. Okay. Let's see here. How many students can you work with at a time? Is the first question. Hey Brian, good to see you. So it was actually, we were in a really small space. My residents and medical students could talk. So sometimes it would get a little crowded. And so we would actually have a coordinated schedule sometimes. And that would be like, right, the best scenario is that we would have too many people that we couldn't fit in the room. So we actually had students that would come in on the weekends. They would definitely want to be in there. They knew what they needed to do. So they would come in on weekends, nights. We were actually working with sometimes, 2 residents on a rotation at a time. Most of the time it was just one, but sometimes 2 residents on a rotation. And then those would also have medical students and also other types of trainees in there at a time. So it did get kind of snug.
So usually no fewer than 2 and maybe as many as 6 at a time, I think was some of our highest ones. We had like multiple residents and multiple med students, I believe. But then it was 2 to 6. Now we're gonna have more space. We'll be able to be open to more individuals in that respect there.
Okay, so next question is, how do you find, what do you find to be the largest learning curve for learners, hardware or software? I'll answer my way. I think we kind of had a little bit of I mean, the residents, especially the residents, are working on PACS systems, right? Radiology workstations. So I think that they had kind of a little bit of an insight in how imaging, but the software we used has a steep learning curve. We all kind of know it. So I think a lot of times the software was difficult. The printers, it really depended on whether or not they actually had any experience in it or not. But most folks took to it pretty well. What do you think, Jonathan?
Um, uh, Honestly, the printers were the easier part, I think. The software was a bit of a learning curve in that respect. The printers was like, it's broken. Okay, let's figure out how to fix it. And then usually it was a lot of hand holding because usually it was a 2-person job in that respect. And we were able to see the frustration of like, great, now we got to get this part shipped. There's a case that is like waiting instantly for that part. So there's that. The software was can be a bit of a headache. There's a lot of different softwares out there. Some are easier to learn than others. But that usually was the biggest learning curve. But once they had it, and then we were able to go from there.
Awesome. Okay, another question here. What has been done of the most exciting advancements that since you started in this field? Yeah, John, why don't you answer that?
So basically, the field's constantly moving, so it is variation on the theme, but like the software is getting better. The software can do more things. The printers are getting better. The printers can do more things. There's new materials coming out. When we first started, there was nothing that was remotely safe enough to get you anywhere near a patient to physically touch them. And now we're talking about getting things that can actually be implanted permanently in them. So that is happening, and then bioresorbables are happening. So that is coming on. Metals are for implantables in patients, or a thing that can be done. So the printing technology itself is getting more and more variety and more applications to that. But also then the software is getting more faster, and so it's speeding things up. The printers are getting faster. So there's a time, okay, can I get this print by tomorrow? Yes, the answer is yes. Sometimes now you can get them by the end of the day, if not sooner, depending how small the device you're printing. So efficiency and speed is a huge thing. And also the applications are so varied.
I think for me, it would be the same thing as like how far we've jumped and just, I've been doing this and I like gonna like date myself for almost, I guess, over 20 years now. And just the
Yeah.
quality from the powder-based prints, which I know a lot of us still love those type of prints, but the archaeological excavation and then praying that they they survived that, to being able to implant, and even the faster printers that we're seeing, a number of companies coming out with, being able to print within the hour. This is just really changing what we're able to do as a field, not just clinically, which is obviously the biggest impact in that, but also having trainees sit there and be able to, within the, a specific time frame, and not have to have them, go out for a few days and come back. So being able to do things really quickly. Some of the thing that we did last night actually was a very quick print, with orthopedics. Can we do this? Can we show our residents this? And we're able to do that pretty quickly and turn that around so that they're using it same day, in the skills lab. That's the kind of stuff, and that's patient specific. That's the kind of stuff that makes it really exciting for me. So, okay, as we wrap up here, I think I got time for one question before Leah kills me. Is 3D printing insurance reimbursable? So 3D printing is reimbursable through the current CPT Category 3 codes, and RSNA has a number of webinars on that. So you definitely want to go check those out, because we've got like long sessions on how to do it, what's reimbursable, what's not reimbursable. So that's definitely on the clinical aspect, and there's more coming, so stay tuned on that. But I'm happy to point you to our webinars on YouTube, where you can definitely check those out. So I think we're out of time. Thank you so much. I will flash up the information one more time, so that you can get our contact information, but you can also find us on the 3D SIG website. And if you want to reach out to me, and Jonathan, we're happy to help in any way. Thank you guys.
Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you guys attending.